In 2007, my now husband, Artie, and I moved to Somerville, Mass. to go to grad school, and our date spot was this perfect subterranean space between Central and Harvard Square called Garden at the Cellar. It was helmed by Will Gilson, a chef about our age, who was basically single-handedly running a farm-to-table pop-up out of a small bar. These days, he's the chef and owner of several successful restaurants under his Cambridge Street hospitality group, including Puritan, which was the first restaurant, actually going in and sitting down and having a meal restaurant that my family and I went to after things opened back up after the pandemic. And he also owns Geppetto, which is where I spent my 40th birthday. Now, I've interviewed Will a handful of times over the years about business and restaurants, but this time, we're spending a good amount of the conversation on our busy brains. The good, the challenging, the chaotic. We're elder millennials and New Englanders, remember. So this kind of public, personal dissection doesn't always come easily. But I hope the conversation brings you some fresh perspective, and maybe it resonates with your own experience of throwing yourself into a lot of things and learning some important lessons while keeping the plate spinning. We also have a hot take or two in the Boston restaurant scene, so I hope you enjoy that. And we talk about our hopes for the city's hospitality industry and what we think the year ahead might look like. So I'm so excited for this conversation. Let's chat with Will.
This could happen to you. This could happen to you. This could happen to you.
Will Gilson, welcome to Not From Concentrate.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad you're here. Will, we were just saying before we started recording that the last time I saw you in person, I was wildly pregnant, and it was 2019. So a lot's happened.
As a group, when we went from when I talked to you in 2019, having one restaurant with a couple more that we were working on, to now having 8 different concepts in our group. And, that's such a wild change to go from you thinking that your entire world revolves around one restaurant to now having to keep the plate spinning at so many more places.
It's incredible, the growth and watching your restaurant group grow. And I want to talk about all of that. The other thing I want to talk about today is I have not had a restaurant chef who has ADHD or is willing to talk about having ADHD on the show. And it's something I've put out calls on Instagram. I get PR pitches every day, and I'm like, do you have any restaurant chefs that have ADHD? And I don't want to diagnose anybody, but anybody who's worked in hospitality for 5 seconds, I think would say that a good percentage of folks in the industry are drawn to it because of it. So I'm really grateful that you're here. And it is one of the things that I want to talk about today. So for folks who are not familiar with you, let's back up for a second. I'd love a little bit of just a rundown of your experience, where you are in your restaurant group, how you kind of got there. And then I want to get in a little bit to how, having a busy brain has helped and hurt and shaped you as a chef and an entrepreneur.
I'm the chef and partner of Cambridge Street Hospitality Group. Our first restaurant in that group was Puritan and Company, which we opened up 13 years ago here in Inman Square, where I am today. Prior to that, we'll go back even further. I got my start working in the North End little by little for a chef down on Salem Street at a restaurant called Mercutio's, Chef Chuck Driggy. And then while I was doing that, my parents' farm was sitting there, and we had built this demonstration kitchen inside. And my dad said, "Why don't you see if you could try doing a dinner here, and see if we could sell some tickets?" And the whole idea of that was always to help the farm, have some revenue in the off season when they weren't growing plants and there was no money coming in. And so we started doing these kind of farm to table BYO tasting events, inside of the barn on the property that I grew up on. And, that property is still in our group now, that was 1999 was when we first started doing stuff there. So quite a while, coming up on almost 30 years for that. And, it was a really fun high school project for me, but it was this thing that gave me a leg up of, it's either half leg up, half chip on the shoulder of like when I went off to culinary school, and then I graduated culinary school after like traveling Europe and working in all these, Michelin starred restaurants. Then I came back and I got a job as a line cook at Oleana in Cambridge, because I just had never actually been a line cook and I needed that experience. But, I kind of came in there like with this I wouldn't say it's an alter ego, but this kind of like second life of like, I'm a line cook 4 days a week. And then I go and I like run this restaurant, that's a tasting menu thing on a farm on the weekends. And there's part of that story that's really cool. And then there's also part of that story where like, Anna Sortun, who runs Oleana and owns it, she kept on trying to kind of like bring me down to the level that I needed to be at to understand how much more I still had to learn about working in restaurants and running restaurants. And I was like a hot-headed early 20s kid. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go do this stuff anyhow. And so I went off and I opened up, a restaurant that was a glorified pop-up called Garden at the Cellar, which, I was at for 5 years. And I left that restaurant with a couple James Beard long list, nominations, with, some real notoriety around town.
It was my favorite. I have so many memories. It was like one of the first, because I did the culinary program at BU in 2008, did the gastronomy program after that. And like, that was like our date night spot. My now husband and I, so many memories. Actually, the worst meltdown I ever had finding parking in Boston was trying to park near Garden at the Cellar. And I called Artie crying. I was like, I can't do it. But it was an incredible spot.
It was a restaurant that never should have worked, and in kind of some ways it didn't, and I think that was kind of the issue. I mean, it was people who owned a bar basically partnering with somebody in their early 20s who was trying to prove their worth around town. And I left with a lot of experiences, with a great reputation, and meeting a lot of people who would be the springboard for me to open up, the stuff that's in our group. But I left with debt and with baggage, both emotionally and physically that I had to kind of get through. But I left because I knew that it wasn't going in the direction that I wanted for the future I wanted of opening a restaurant. And, before there was even delusions of grandeur of a restaurant group, it was, how do we create one restaurant that kind of embodies what I want it to be? And I knew that was never going to happen there. So I left and had a controlled nervous breakdown doing a season down at the Cape and running a restaurant down there. And I came back and had, sold my condo and moved back in with my dad, and somebody who I knew from Garden at the Cellar said, hey, I know this guy. He's looking to open a restaurant in Inman Square. And that was where I really wanted to open a restaurant. And we connected. And after like 2 nights of staying up until the sun came up, like writing spreadsheets, like we decided to buy this restaurant. And we've been here, like I said, for 13 years. And then we opened up restaurants during the height of the pandemic, which I would never recommend to anybody to do. It was definitely probably one of the worst periods of time of my life, trying to just kind of feel like every day you were losing, but, still trying to kind of get to the other side of it. And then once we were on the other side of that, we were galvanized with this, like, we were the guys who opened up 3 restaurants in the middle of the first global pandemic in 100 years, right? And so that gave us this opportunity for new deals to come our way. And, we kind of had this street cred of like, all right, like if that can't sink these guys, then here, let's, they can do this and they can do that. And it was fun. The hardest thing was going from one restaurant to 2, and ironically the second restaurant was 3 all in one building. But like to go from 1 to 2 is really hard. But then after that, it really wasn't that hard to figure out how to add more to it. We already were kind of overwhelmed.
A lot of what you're saying there, it kind of resonates with me in the way that, even though we have totally different careers in food, but the way that we need a lot of different projects going on, a lot of different stimulation, doing our best sometimes when our back is to the wall. So if you're open to it, I would love to hear a little bit about the ADHD side of it, and like, when were you diagnosed? What was that experience like for you? How does it fit into your kind of everyday? And then bring it back to kind of the business side.
Yeah. I mean, I still don't know if whether or not my diagnosis is one that I have sort of square pegged into this round hole, or whether or not it is one that really sort of defines me, but it's high functioning to a certain point where like, I'm not Like if I'm sitting here and some shiny object happens over there, like I'm not going to lose my train of thought, right? But I don't do well with nothing going on. I think one of the things that I also have as a sort of a burden, but we've tried to turn it into a powerful weapon, if you will, is seasonal depression. I do not do well in the wintertime. Like if the sun is going down at 4:30, like it does in Massachusetts for a good portion of the wintertime, like I really struggle and I lose my motivation. And so one of the things that I hate taking medicine for it. Like it's just one of the things that like I've never done well. I don't like when medicine doesn't let me understand what my peaks and valleys are about like how I process the world. I oftentimes thrive with pressure. I think that's why kitchen environments work really well, is because they're chaos and you kind of have to be thinking on the fly. But that does take a toll on you as well. So you kind of need to have this balance. But, the wintertime stuff, I started doing home projects. Once we had bought a home and, there's never any shortage of projects to do when you own a home, I would pick one that I wanted to do in the summertime when it was nice outside, but one that I could do on the inside during the wintertime where there was a beginning, middle, and an end, right? Because restaurants, you open them and then you have to keep them open. So there's no real end unless you decide that there's an end to them. Or the lease ends, right? But with a project where you're working with your hands, we make projects in restaurants all day long, right? So you're like, oh, I've got to braise this duck, right? So you're breaking down a duck, you sear the duck, you put it in a pan, you add the liquid, you add the vegetables, you add the herbs, you add the, aromatics, whatever you want to do, and then it cooks. But then you just kind of wash, rinse, repeat. That just becomes part of a cycle. There isn't something that is done at the end that you can just kind of look at. I think it's why some chefs become painters because they like, using their creativity to create something that then you can hang on a wall and you stare at, right? And for me, it's more of like, what is something that I can do? And sometimes it's just me being cheap, where I'm like, I don't want to pay a contractor to do that. Like I'll watch a couple of YouTube videos and I'll figure it out. And sometimes the projects turn out really great and sometimes not so much, but I always need a project. And I'm sure to the people who work for me, it's to their detriment that like I'm always kind of saying yes. Yeah. And like saying yes to things and like, oh, we should try this or we should try that. And I think early on when I didn't have a good foundation for running Puritan, the opening team got really irritated and stressed out by that behavior because it did seem so manic, where like 5 minutes before we were going to open for service for the day with a full set of reservations, I'd be like, we're changing these 3 things. And they'd be like, are you absolutely kidding me right now? Like this, we cannot do this. But it was a way to kind of keep everybody, I don't know, focused on that things can change that quickly in a restaurant. All of a sudden show up and people have allergies, like a cook goes down, someone cuts themselves. Like it's just kind of part of the training that I got used to. I think a lot of it was the chaos of growing up with 2 parents who owned a business and like working for them, where it was just, there's always, I wouldn't say drama or strife, but like there was always challenging things happening all the time, especially in farming. It's like, oh, like we planted this whole crop and we've put all of our money into this. And if this doesn't grow, like we're screwed.
Yeah. Do you find that you're more comfortable in those sort of like chaotic, intense environments as opposed to having nothing going on? Because like I find it physically painful, and I find myself the most stressed out when I'm supposed to have like a chill day. Like if I have a day that I have a book deadline, a private chef client, a column due, I can get it done. And then if I have a day where I'm like, all you have to do is like a little admin work and like this one other thing, that's when my head spins. I'm curious if you're that way, or maybe you've evolved and you're not, and you do better with open stretches of headspace.
I self-sabotage deadlines a lot, and I don't know why. It's like, my wife and I watch the show The Pit every week, and for her, it's the most stressful hour of her week. And for me, it is like, oh, okay, that's what that feels like. Like I experienced that today. Like not as many people dying or, needing like life-saving things, but like, it's like, oh my God, the dishwasher broke. Like, oh, the dishwasher person cut themselves. Like, oh, like this person didn't come in. Like this person has a slew of allergies that were not on the reservation. Like, oh my God, there's a health inspection happening and it's 6:00 on a Friday night. Like all of those things kind of happen in this beautiful chaos that we have created in restaurants. And ironically, when I was doing it out at the farm when I was like a teenager in my early 20s, a lot of that was only because the chaos that would happen there would be because I had created it. I had decided that I wanted to push the envelope on something and it didn't work. And now all these people are sitting down for dinner and like I've burned this thing that like I needed to serve to everyone. And it's not a full restaurant where I can just be like, oh, now you're having this. It was like, that was it. Like that was what we had. But I think that, you know, through a lot of that, I learned that the pressure often creates the most amount of creativity that I have. I don't know why. I mean, maybe that is, you know, a perfect example of having sort of an ADHD brain. But I do, you know, like before this call, I've been negotiating a letter of intent on leasing and then purchasing a restaurant space.
Is this a scoop that we're getting right now, Will? Are we getting a scoop? You'll
get
on a
little bit of it. Okay. But like I was concurrently doing that while also pulling permits to do something that like this whole project would negate, right? That I wouldn't have to do. And so I had both of those things going on at the same time, and both parties wanted answers today. And I found out at like the 11th hour or 90 minutes ago that one of them would cost significantly more money if I didn't have the other one. And so I had delayed it intentionally because I was like, I don't want to commit to either of these things until I have all of the answers in there. All the people involved in the process on all sides of it are so stressed out right now. And I got to the end and I go, I'm so glad that I procrastinated on all those things, because had I not, like this problem would not have solved the other problem. And that is not a good, healthy way. Like, I don't want to raise my kids to think that way, you know, but that is how I operate. And knowing that and trusting myself and knowing how that has burned me before has kept me going in the right direction. I mean, how do you even edit an episode with somebody talking through ADHD? I mean, like, I feel so bad for your producer because this is going to be like, where did he come from with that one?
It's called Not From Concentrate, and obviously I have it, which is how this whole project got started.
So I have a question for you as somebody who's probably in the same boat as me. Do you leave lots of projects unfinished, or are you very good at taking on lots of projects at the same time and doing them all at like 80%?
I am more likely to leave them unfinished. As I get older and I hope more self-aware, build some stronger muscles, I'm getting better at finishing them. Curious about you. Do you leave, how do you do it? I get the sense that you go 100%, but maybe that's changed or is not the case.
No, I guess I'd say this is like being married to somebody who is very focused on outcomes has really helped condition me into taking the parts of me that would leave things unfinished and get them over the finish line. I think also being a boss to a large company where lots of different people report to me has also allowed that for me to get better at delegating. And I think delegating means that I don't have to take everything across the finish line. I have to give everybody the tools that they need to help something get over the finish line. And if it completely falls on me and my shoulders, then I have to do that. But oftentimes I will say, don't tag me in until you absolutely need me, because I'm every day doing this mental accounting of like, how much bandwidth do I have available? Because yes, I can keep 10 plates spinning at the same time that are all different shapes and sizes, but there will get to be a time where someone says, I need one of those plates. You need to take one down. And you have to do the calculation of like, well, how am I going to do that with all these things going? And so I think sometimes when I've learned to delegate, it helps me understand where I actually need to focus my attention on the things that are the most important. You know, my dad late in life got diagnosed with ADD, and he let it define his personality for probably about 5 years as an excuse for all the things that he had that weren't finished. And like, I love my dad to death. He's one of my favorite people in the whole world. He's such a great guy. But every time I go out to the farm, I see all of these things. Like, there's like 7 broken shovels. And I'm like, are you ever going to put a new handle on these shovels, or are you just going to throw it away? And so I have to then just like go rent a dumpster and throw everything in. And then I'll leave the dumpster there for a really long time because I'm thinking I want to add something to it, right? So it's like it's the same problem, just like spun in a very different way.
Big fat mirror being held up.
Yeah, he's like, someday I'm going to fix that shovel. And I'm like, I'm going to throw away all of your goddamn shovels. But I'm going to wait until that entire thing is full. And I've got some things I want to get there. And I don't know when I'm going to be able to get them there. Maybe it's just like a refined or elevated version of it. But, you get conditioned. I think half of it is biological and the other half, I think, is environmental, right? Like if you learn to live in chaos, then you thrive. It either consumes you or you thrive in chaos, right? I mean, like, I think that those are the only two ways that can go. I enjoy shutting it off at different times, but I have to be like on a vacation where there's nothing going on. I've learned that we have to take trips out of the state or out of the country, because if I'm nearby and somebody can get a hold of me, I will seriously consider going back to solve the problem. Again, that's where the delegation comes in, where like I've had to learn to be like that. There's too many problems that I can't solve all of these, so I need someone who's responsible for solving that problem for me.
I relate to the needing to be out of your environment because you're like, you see the thing and you want to fix it. Something I want to just like unpack a little bit more, because I think it's relevant to so many people listening, is that time where you realized like, oh, I need people around me and delegating can be a good thing. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened and tips that you might have for folks who are maybe not restaurant chefs, but someone is listening and they're like, I can't let go. I have to do everything myself. I have to do 75 projects and I can't stop myself and I can't pass anything off. Can you talk about the process of understanding that you need to delegate and how you think about that and advice you might have for someone who's struggling with that?
I'd say for me, it was really hard to get to the other side of it because I'm an only child. I was like employee number 3 of 2 people who were running a business together growing up. And so I often was there as sort of a catch-all. Like even to this day, my dad would be like, can you drive out today and bring me your chainsaw? And I have to be like, no, like I won't do that. But for years I'd be like, okay. And I would stop whatever I was doing and I would go do that. And so when I was running the Herbal Lyceum out in Groton, I would only be able to rely on myself. I didn't have anybody working for me in the kitchen most of the time. It was like if there was something that had to be done, I had to do it. If I was sick, I had to work through being sick. It was amazing conditioning for being a business owner in the future, because you're just like, okay, I'll step on that landmine and then I'll hobble across to the next place with a missing leg, right? And so it was the hardest thing for me was undoing that. Like when I had a team of people working for me in the kitchen, I had such a hard time delegating. I had such a hard time getting people to do it that I think that that's why at the last minute when they couldn't say no, I would dump stuff on them because I'd be like, this is the only way that I function. Like I'm functioning with my brain working super fast and connecting all these synapses at the like 1 yard line of like this thing needing to happen. And then just being like, oh, now we got to go another yard. Now we got to go another yard. Right. And so I would just like do that to people who work for me. And for some people that would work really well and other people that would not work well at all. And it took me a while to realize how I was doing that wrong. And I don't think I really even got there until we were doing multiple things. And I was like, I need to know that like, I can't be in 2 places at once. So I think when you can look yourself in the mirror and say, there's no way you're going to be in 2 places at once. So what are the things that you're comfortable shedding? What are the things that you're comfortable enlisting somebody else to solve for you? It requires a lot of trust too. I mean, I think that's like one of the hardest things, and someone needs to kind of totally get you, or you need to totally get them and understand how they can help you.
That makes a lot of sense. And can I ask, how does it, understanding that we're still human beings and imperfect, but how does that feel to be on the other side of it? Because like, I know sometimes when I'm in that moment, I'm like, I'm sure it would be great if somebody else was taking care of this, but I can't even muster the strength to do the administrative tasks required to pass this to somebody else because I'm so in the situation right now. Like I would like a pep talk of what it feels like on the other side. Like, is your nervous system in better shape? Do you have room for bigger thinking? Like, what are the benefits of?
I won't like edit the fact that like self-medicating is probably one of the most dangerous things about my industry and probably others as well. But like one of the ways that you try to turn it off, right? Because like after a day of like 11 hours straight of solving problems and dealing with things on the fly and whatnot, there was nobody teaching meditating like when I was coming up in this industry. There was no like people being like, I'm setting firm boundaries. It was like push, 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 go, 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 do more, do more, do more. And I think that there was a time where, you know, when I was younger and probably on the other side of 40, where I just be like, all right, have a few drinks, turn off. Just, you know, sit there, stare at the wall, watch a movie that you've watched 100 times because it's predictable and you don't need the stress of trying to figure out at this hour something that you might not like that you're going to get invested in. That was an easy crutch. And then it got to a point now where I'm like, oh, it's 9:30. I can't wait to go to bed. Right. And like getting a full night of sleep because my kids are going to wake me up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm going to have a full day before I even show up to a group of people who report to this restaurant at 3 p.m. Right. Like by the time they're getting here and I'm trying to do the last third of my day, like I've already visited 3 of our properties. I've crossed 30 emails out of my inbox and, you know, I'm working on something that's I need to do the next day. Right. And I think that was not always the case before. I would let a lot of things die on the vine because I just had too much going on and my brain was in survival mode and it would be like, you can only do what's right in front of you right now. We live in this world now that is almost tailored to someone whose brain works that way. I have all of my restaurants connected through one communication platform. And on that communication platform is every document that I need every single person who works in all those places to be able to reference. They can tag me in things that are super important. They can see things that I'm working on. That bit of transparency and this amount of direct connectivity where like, I don't have to drive down to that restaurant for the management meeting today. I can just after this, fire up another Google Meet window and like hop in that and I can talk to every single person that's at that restaurant as if I'm there. And if they really need me to be there, well, yeah, it's a mile away. I can go down there. But if I don't have to go down there, then I can be far more efficient with my time here. These are all things that took me getting to 40 to be able to kind of point in the right direction, put it that way.
I heard you say somewhere that Puritan was like your grad school and that you were taking everything you've learned and then putting it towards these other properties that you're building. Whether it was Puritan or Garden at the Cellar, I want to hear how that life experience translates and how you've kind of taken those lessons. Because I think a lot of people take those licks and those hard knocks and they are too beaten down to do anything with them. And I say the same thing about my failed food startup. Like that was my grad school. I say it all the time, or my business school. So what are some practical things that you took from the experience at the Cellar and you put that towards what you're doing now?
I wonder how much of it is practical as much as gaslighting myself into thinking that like it went a different way. I think in my previous iterations of restaurants and even the early stages of the first one in our current restaurant group, half of what happens is, am I going to take away something from this or am I going to let this consume me? Right? Like, you know, like, okay, that's done. It's broken. It's failed. I remember watching the first person at this restaurant, like accidentally send out a plate of food to somebody that they had an allergy. And they were like, am I fired? And I said, no, but I need you to understand all the ways that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. I'm going to go out to that table and I'm going to apologize to them and I'm going to do that. But if I fire you, this might deter you from staying in this business for the rest of your life or career, right? But if you remember this moment and you remember how awful it felt every single time you're getting ready to send a plate of food out, if you're processing it the right way, it won't break you, but it'll help you remember how to check yourself before you say yes to something. And I think that can be applicable to almost anything. If you've done something and it failed, you can either repeat, right? I mean, broken clock is right twice a day, or, you know, you end up having this type of scenario where like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like you just will always do the same thing over and over again. Like, that's just me. Like, that's what I do. Or you can be like, I never want to do that again. That felt so awful. I never want to have that happen to me again. And I think in a lot of business, that's how you learn. I mean, I hate that kind of founder mentality where it's like, I had to fail before I could succeed. No, failing sucks. Like any way you cut it, failing sucks. And it can ruin you financially, like emotionally for the rest of your life. And so when I talk about like, looking at a closed restaurant or something that you've had to walk away from, or the early stages of something that you're building, failing and teaching you lessons as grad school, it's because there are lessons, if you were willing to pay attention to them, that happened during that time. And there's usually a financial cost that came with that if you're willing to gaslight yourself into saying like, well, that's just what grad school costs. So if I learned all of these things and I'm willing to take away all of that, then I can chalk that up as like, that's what that cost.
HBS could have gotten it, but
yeah, exactly. There's an emotional, a physical, and real capital cost to these things. And especially when you have to convince people to give you money. You're like, those are relationships that you have to figure out how to deal with. It was a thing from a Bronx Tale. It's like you owe that person money and you keep chasing them down, you keep trying to get it, or that you owe that person money and it didn't end well. Well, maybe you'll never have to see them again, right? Like those are the type of things that you start to look at with these relationships. Like I've never walked back into the place where I had my first restaurant. You couldn't pay me to go in there, but I drive by it all the time and I see it and I remember the good times and the bad times. But like going back into that, like I don't need to hash that out again. I took away what I needed from that to be able to formulate how I behave moving forward. I think that that's a healthy way to process trauma, of anything. You're also talking to somebody who's been in therapy for 12 years. And I think that that's one of the things that's helped me shape how I view things in a very positive way, because before it would just be like, that's just me, right? Instead of being like, well, but why did that happen? Why did you do that? Was that your fault or was that circumstantial? Should you let that define you moving forward?
So we've gotten this far and we haven't even talked about food. And so I want to talk about food a little bit. One of the things that I have always admired about you and enjoyed about our conversations over the years is that you've always had this really kind of like sprightly business brain. Like you clearly enjoy business and you're also a creative and a chef. Can you talk a little bit about how you balance staying creative, thinking about the food and, what's going out on the plate and the menus and of course the hospitality, and how do you balance that with the business side, especially as your group has grown?
I think it's changed a lot over the past few years. I'd say for the past 5 years, I've been trying to find a steward of Puritan, finding somebody who could come here and be the chef and I could give them everything we're talking about. Like, here are all the lessons that I've learned. Like, here's the ways that you should do things. But at the same time, being excited that somebody would come in with ideas that are not mine, because I like that. I like the exposure of being around people. It's like when chefs love doing guest chef dinners, because you're there with other chefs. You only have to focus on your plate of food, but you get to watch how other people do it, which is not what you normally get to see in the environment that you run every day. But I've also run into this issue where, like, I've had a lot of people come in who talk a big game and they hop in this kitchen and they don't know the clientele. They don't know the staff. They don't know that this is a living, breathing thing. I mean, despite it being 4 walls surrounded by brick and filled with chairs and plates, like, restaurants are living, breathing things. They are only worked by the people that you hire and the people who elect to dine there, right? And so I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, I'm just going to keep writing the menus. And that will always make me feel like I have some connection to these places that I own. But I just need people to show up who can execute the food that I want, which is no different than like how half of corporate restaurants work across the country. But having multiple places that all have different menu concepts to them has sort of allowed me to, getting back to kind of the start of all this, like, have that brain that is going in a lot of different directions at once, but have outlets for all of them. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to everyone. I don't think it works for everyone, but it does work for me. And I think I've surrounded myself with people who know what to expect when we're opening up something new, and they kind of fill in the gaps. They're like, okay, well, you're very good at being creative, but you're not very good at sitting down and writing up the tasting notes for the entire kitchen. You know, when I've had to do that before, I've just turned on like a dictating app on my computer, and I just sit there and I just talk to it like you and I are having a conversation. And the notes get wild, right? Because there's no real kind of coherent train of thought as to why you're writing that down. But again, another way that technology has sort of allowed for you to do things that your own physical and mental limitations might not otherwise permit. I enjoy having all these different restaurant concepts because I get to scratch a lot of different itches. But then there are times where I'm like, God, like I've got to think of a new menu for this Italian restaurant. And like I haven't eaten in an Italian restaurant in the past 3 months. So where are my ideas coming from? Am I just circulating old ideas and putting a twist on them? And that's where I get stuck sometimes, is that like, I'm like, how do I keep things fresh? Like oftentimes it's when I travel, I'll see things, I'll try things and I'll write them down. I'll remember them and I'll come back and I'll try to do that. But if I haven't gone on a trip in the past 6 months, there might be no fresh ideas.
Well, that brings me to, there's something we always do in the podcast. It's called the busy brain section of the podcast. And the first question is always, what do you do to spark creativity in the kitchen? And it can be your home kitchen. It can be your restaurant kitchen. But we've all been there feeling burnt out or uninspired. It sounds like travel might be a part of that for you.
I've always enjoyed travel, and thankfully I'm married to somebody who really likes travel, and she's far more gung-ho about taking our children on travel than I am most of the time. So if it weren't for that, then my kids might not get a chance to experience it kind of quite the same way. But I do enjoy solo trips every once in a while, like going to a city for 2 days just by myself. And I try not to do that very often because I find that to be kind of unfair on the home front. But, you know, it's those kind of things. Like I won a competition with the American Lamb Board back in the fall, and the prize was to go
Lamb Jam?
Lamb Jam. I won Lamb Jam in Boston.
I've judged Lamb Jam a few times in my day.
and it's always a lot of lamb. But I won, and I got a chance to go down to Texas, and I flew into Austin, and I purposefully flew into Austin, 6 hours before I was allowed to check in so that I could just try a bunch of places that I wanted to try. And the 4 bites of food that I had on that period of time when I was there, and I think also just the time where I had I wasn't worried about the safety of my children, right? I wasn't worried about having to get from point A to point B in any sort of timeline, and I was not by my work. Let my brain focus on the things that were, I don't know, sometimes that you forget, right? That you were inspired by when you were in your 20s, working in London, and you stumbled into a fish and chip shop and you liked the mushy peas, right? And that became how you viewed flavoring peas for 5 years after that, right? Those are the type of things that I think I miss a lot, that every once in a while I have to try to recreate, whether it be intentionally or at least, with some planned accidental nature, right? So some spontaneity. One
of the hardest parts of middle age, I find.
It sure is.
You have to work a lot harder to get those moments of pure inspiration. The second part of that question, Will, is how do you calm the chaos in the kitchen? And it could be mental chaos or physical chaos.
I think being in control of your environment is a huge part of that. We recently had a chef depart here at Puritan, and 2 days after that happened, I hopped in the kitchen and I rewrote the whole menu. And everything that everybody was unhappy with, whether it be staff, whether it be guests or me, when you draw an Etch-a-Sketch and you don't like it and you just shake the whole thing up, right? And it's now it's gone. Clean slate, but you're back. You know what you want to draw, right? Because you've drawn on there before. So I just redrew it the way that I wanted to, with all the things that I observed and with all the guest feedback and staff feedback. And from that, I had it back exactly where I wanted it. And then there was this calm that came. Every day the staff shows up, things are happening the way that they're supposed to on schedule, right? Every time you're getting a batch of reviews the next day, they're all 5 stars, right? Those are the type of things where we like, because when you get a negative review, you can cherry pick the parts out that you're okay, that they were right. Those things do need to be fixed, or we definitely let our guard down there. Rather than it being this thing where I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like that, I don't like that are all kind of coming at the same time. And so I think being in control of your environment is really helpful in a professional world. I think if I'm trying to calm myself at home with doing a home project at the darkest days of the winter, the only way that works is by getting to the end of it and, knowing that you kind of have to persevere. And that's it. That the only way that this pain stops is by getting to the end of it.
That's such a New England farmer answer. Well,
oh my God. I mean, listen, I'm 13th generation Mayflower descendant.
I can see your 300-year-old.
Yeah. my family has had to survive a lot of winters to get to the other side of this all. And so there's always going to be a spring. Right? Like there's always going to be a spring after the winter. It might be a wet one, it might be a dry one, might be a cold one, might be a warm one, but there's always going to be one on the other side of the hardest time. And I think that just years of generations of my family kind of experiencing that and living that has probably shaped me in more ways than I'm willing to admit.
Will, thank you so much for coming on the show today, and let me pepper you with all those questions about your busy brain. And please apologize to whoever is behind on their mise en place because we made them shut off the blender. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
And you. Thank you for taking the time to be here, and I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Will. If you're headed to Boston, I hope you'll check out one of his restaurants. They're all on this side of the Charles River, which is why we love them. Cambridge and Somerville forever. And you guys, I ask this every time, but if you like this episode, I would love for you to share it with a food-loving, busy-brained friend. We need all the help we can get finding each other. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Not From Concentrate is produced by me, Catherine Smart, with audio and video production by Kevin O'Connell. Allie Miller is our associate producer, and the theme music is by Kylie Daly.